As we all know the great saying, the path to hell is always paved with good intentions. On January 19th, midnight, 1920, America became dry. Prohibition became legal. And this was known to be so-called the Great Experiment, the Nobel Experiment. And hundred years later now, we know that was not the cause. Although none of us were born in those times during Prohibition, as global citizens of this world and citizens of America, it is our responsibility to know the history and to know such big event in history and to know and to learn from it eventually. That is always the purpose, right? So Prohibition taught a society a great lesson. I think that's what it should be called, the Great Red Lesson, rather than the Great Experiment. So after doing some research about Prohibition, I would like to inform you guys about some of the origins and some of the consequences that came about, the unintended consequences and intended consequences of Prohibition. So as I said, Prohibition by definition bans sale of all alcoholic products. But in America, it did not work out. The ban, because it was hard to enforce, people were not very joyful about it, and it actually led to an increase in crime rates, it led to an increase in immortality, it led to an increase in homicides, it led to an increase in people being in prison, which it led to a decrease in tax revenue, which was the exact opposite of exactly what we intended to do. So now that we know what Prohibition was and what were some of the intentions for the Prohibition, let's move on to the origins of prohibitions. In 1917, we entered the World War I under Woodrow Wilson, and he thought that he put a temporary prohibition into place, which was actually going to last, I believe, only 7 years. But within 11 months, 3/4 of the country voted into prohibition as a law, as an amendment. So within 11 months, on January 19th, like I said earlier, became a national, federal, and became illegal to consume any liquor or the sale of any liquor. Some of the other things, according to economist Mark Thornton in his book Economics of Prohibition, he actually noted that the women's temperance movement, as you see on the right, these ladies actually also played a big part in Prohibition. Before Woodrow Wilson actually did all that and did his temporary prohibition, these women actually were able to get their prohibitions law passed in several states, only on a state level, not on a federal level. But these women claimed that our country was drinking too much. There was a rise in consumption of alcohol. There was a rise in spousal abuse. There was a rise in immorality. People were not being moral, and they were just saying our society was not going the same way. They were saying too many people were going to jail because of all this. And some other things that Mark Thornton noted was that there were salons in every corner of the city almost. They were being, the churches were being outnumbered 30-1, which was these women temperance movements actually one of their arguments, that there's so many salons that our society is becoming very immoral, like I said earlier. So the 18th Amendment was eventually passed, and so began the Prohibition era, as we call it. Now let's talk about enforcement and some of the things. Some of the things we gotta think about Prohibition is when you make something illegal, it changes the way people do things. So when alcohol became illegal, but people were still drinking it because there was such a big black market. When you make something that everybody wants illegal, all it really does is it raises the price and creates criminals. It creates an opportunity for a criminal to operate. It gives an opportunity to a criminal to make trillions of dollars that were actually going to actual legal corporations. Now those criminals can make those money by providing these people the same product, which organized crime, where it comes from this. They were organizing these activities to provide these people alcohol, which were victimless crimes. Nobody was really a victim. These people actually wanted the alcohol. So this gave rise to big syndicates. This gave a rise to a lot of crime rates, homicides, and as I said earlier, our tax dollars were getting increased because we had to now pay to put these criminals down. And like I was saying earlier, change people's drinking habits. For example, if you go to a bar, sometimes people went to a bar to have one drink, but now you don't get the chance to have a drink every day. This time people went to the bar to get drunk, you know? So It was just that people's drinking habits were changing very highly. And like I said, it removed tax revenue. The liquor sales removed all the tax revenue, and all the tax revenue was going where? In the pockets of Mr. Al Capone and other syndicates that became in the rise. And I'm sure you guys have heard of Al Capone. He actually, I think, made a staggering $60 million off of just this business over a span of like 5-6 years, and which is ridiculous if you ask me, and those $60 million are worth a crazy amount of number today. And why was that possible? Because people still wanted liquor, and our government did not want it, and it was not the right thing to do at the time. So according to Charlestown in Rise and Fall of Prohibition in 1923, he actually noted that according to a study in 30 major U.S. cities, crime increased 24% from 1920 to 1921. And according to a U.S. Bureau of Census, crime rates were higher every year after Prohibition. And I'm going to show you a chart. Crime rates are actually correlated directly with the number of homicides, and this is a homicide chart. And if you look at it, increasing every year until 1933, the year Prohibition was repealed. And this is another chart that shows you it's a prison population at a Sing Sing prison. And it shows you a chart of the increase in the inmates. And like, we were supposed to achieve the exact opposite. We were supposed to make inmates go down, but inmates were going up. And there's another very, very good quote that was said by the Commissioner of Prohibition, Henry Anderson. He said that public corruption through the purchase of official protection for this illegal traffic is widespread and notorious. Courts are cluttered with prohibition cases to an extent which seriously affects the entire administration of justice. Every case in the court was about prohibition, about someone drinking liquor. We couldn't even deal with real criminals at this point. So ultimately, and actually, I would like to share one more quote that I wanted to say earlier, but I totally missed it. It's a quote by Assistant Secretary, and he said that conspiracies are nationwide in great number, organized, widespread, and cleverly conducted. He was actually referring directly to Al Capone and his syndicates while he was talking about this, just to give you a little idea of some of the things it gave rise to. Also, smoking tripled over the time of Prohibition because people were going to substitutes. And Prohibition was ultimately repealed in 1933. And in summary, Prohibition was a good intentions, but failed to live up to its hype. Thank you.